So let me ask you a question. What do you call someone who builds a fire station next to a warehouse full of gasoline, then writes the building code? Oh, and they just so happen to be holding a box of matches. Because that's essentially what I'm about to show you. The DOJ just dropped thousands of pages proving it wasn't a coincidence. It was a business plan. I'm talking about Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates, JPMorgan Chase, and a 20-year architecture that turned pandemics into profit centers. And somehow your favorite mainstream media outlets have said not one word about it. This is going to get very interesting. Did you ever wonder how the vaccines seemed to come out so quickly when COVID-19 hit? Hmm. Does it sound like it might have been planned for years before it even happened? But before we dive in, I just want to be very clear. This is not about whether COVID-19 was manufactured in a lab. That's a whole separate conversation for another day. This is about something arguably more disturbing, what was already in place before COVID-19 ever arrived. We're talking donor advised funds, pandemic reinsurance products, simulation exercises, offshore vaccine structures, and career placement pipelines, all documented in emails, text messages, and financial agreements. And they all involved a convicted sex offender who apparently had more access to Bill Gates than most of us have access to our own bank accounts. And here's the kicker: none of this required some shadowy global conspiracy. It just required really rich people doing what really rich people do, making sure they're positioned to profit when the thing they've been preparing for finally happens. You know, some call it preparedness, some call it pre science. I'm going to call it what it actually looks like, a pre-positioning for profit. And the mainstream media, they are absolutely silent about it. Crickets, almost like they don't want you asking questions about who made billions while you were locked in your house watching Netflix on end. So let's start asking some of those questions, starting with an email from February 2011. You know, this JP Morgan executive, her name Juliet Poulas, sends an email to Jeffrey Epstein. I'll blow this up, make it bigger. So she sends this email to Jeffrey Epstein, not to a wealth advisor, not to a compliance officer, to Jeffrey Epstein. A man, by the way, had already been convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution. The email contains a questionnaire, very specific, very operational. And they were questions like, what are the sponsor's objectives? Is anonymity important? Who directs the investments? Who directs the grants? And here's the line at the very top that should really stop people cold. These questions came from the JP Morgan team that is putting together some ideas for Gates. So let me get this straight. JP Morgan, one of the most financial powerful institutions on the planet, was asking a convicted sex offender to design the architecture of a Gates-linked charitable fund. They're not consulting him. They're not running things by him. They're asking him to design it. And Epstein, he doesn't hesitate. Same day, he replies with a fully formed plan: donor advised fund, stellar board, investment committee, distribution committee tied to the giving pledge. And then he drops the gem: they all have tax advisor. Here's in his reply: they all have a tax advisor, but have no real clue on how to give it away. Translation: these billionaires need someone to help them manage their wealth. And apparently, the guy they chose was fresh off a plea deal for sex crimes. But wait, it gets even better. Jess Staley, JP Morgan's top executives, reads Epstein's response with replies with 2 words: we need to talk. Sorry, that one was still back there. At the very top, it said, we still need to talk. Now, I don't know about you, but when a Wall Street CEO tells a convicted felon, we need to talk about structuring a fund for one of the richest men alive, that's not a red flag. That should be a billboard. So fast forward 5 months to July 2011. Epstein sends an email to Staley, now copying Boris Nikolic. And that's Bill Gates' chief science and technology officer. And buried in that email is a phrase, I need you to hear clearly. I highlighted it here: a silo-based proposal that would get Bill more money for vaccines. Not more research, not emergency capacity at all. This is not for emergencies. This is for vaccines, not public health infrastructure, money for vaccines. And if you think I'm reading too much into the phrasing, let me introduce you to another email. This one was in August And I'll blow this one up as well. This is August 2011, August 17th. Mary Erdos, she is the CEO of JPMorgan Asset Wealth Management, overseeing $2 trillion. She emails Epstein directly. She's on vacation in Colorado. She's seeing Jess daily, and she has some questions, some very specific questions. Epstein replies same night with a plan so detailed, it's almost impressive. $100 million minimums, projected scale, $100 billion within 2 years, advisory boards, investment committees, offshore flexibility, and then this line. However, and I'll blow it up even more, he says, however, we should be ready with an offshore arm. I've highlighted it there at the top. Again, we should be ready with an offshore arm, especially for vaccines. So, I'm no financial expert by any means, but when someone says you need an offshore arm, especially for vaccines, I'm pretty sure we're not talking about protecting children from measles. We're talking about protecting profits from taxes. But it gets even better. Same email thread, Epstein describes Gates' emotional state. And I have it here. He said, Bill is terribly frustrated. He would like to boost some of the things that are working without taking away from those that are not. Therefore, explaining that this would allow additional money for vaccines must be included in the presentation. So Epstein isn't just designing the fund, he's coaching JPMorgan executives on how to pitch Bill Gates by using vaccines as the emotional hook. Oh, and there's one more thing from that August 28th email. And I highlighted it here again. Epstein writes, the tension is making money from a charitable organization. Therefore, the money-making parts needs to be at arm's length. So let that sink in. The architect of this structure, a convicted sex offender, is explicitly acknowledging that the goal is to generate profit under the legal cover of charity. His solution, make sure it looks separated, like what we call, I don't know, sounds like a shell game. I don't know. That's what it sounds like to me. But again, I'm no financial expert. So here's where it gets really, really sketchy to literally structurally, it becomes insane. So we jump ahead to 2017. So this was all 2011. So we jump ahead to 2017. An email thread between Epstein, Gates, and Boris Nicolette. They're discussing donor advising funds again. And I'll blow this up. Nicolette, he writes, it might be a great path forward for some key areas such as energy, pandemic, etc. Pandemic listed like it's a standing investment category, like energy or like tech, like real estate, not a hypothetical emergency or a funding vertical. Literally, it just sounds like another category of investments. And that same year, January 2017, there's a text message thread from Epstein's phone, and it's a career planning conversation. An associate is listing their credentials to land a job. And I'll blow this up again. And it says, my expertise is public health security. Pandemics, just did pandemic simulation and threats to US health. That could be a big platform. Pandemic simulation isn't a public health drill. It's like literally it's a resume, like bullet point on somebody's resume. It's almost like it's like a career currency. Like I have the simulation. I've done it before. And where is this person trying to get placed? Now, I'm going to read you the list. The list is here. He's trying to get placed on Boris Nicolette's Biometrics Capital, Bill Gates' private office, Merck's vaccine team, Swiss Re's pandemic reinsurance unit, World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs, and the World Bank. Every single node in the pandemic preparedness to profit pipeline, all brokered through Epstein's phone. And about Swiss Re, the associate says, did one for pandemics help develop parametric trigger. So the translation is they builded a financial product that automatically pays out when a pandemic is declared. It's like insurance for the apocalypse, except you're getting rich by betting on it. So let me recap this. from 2017. Remember, this is 3 years before COVID-19 hit. The people closest to Gates were treating this pandemic as one, a funding category, a career credential, investable asset class, and a reinsurance product with automatic triggers. Preparedness, sure, but pre-positioning, absolutely. Absolutely. So we go to October 18th, 2019, 6 weeks before the first acknowledged cases of COVID-19. John Hopkins World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation host Event 201, a high-level pandemic simulation featuring, wait for it, a novel coronavirus. That simulation didn't focus on hospital capacity or vaccine development or public health messaging. It focused on government coordination, pharmaceutical supply chains, media management, social media, censorship strategies, public compliance, international government alignment. Like, it was literally a dress rehearsal, not for a disease response, for a narrative control. Now, I want to be very clear. Event 201 did not cause COVID-19. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is this: when you simulate a coronavirus pandemic weeks before a real one emerges, and that simulation aligns with years of financial structure, patent development, reinsurance products, donor advised funds, career placement, and offshore vaccine arms, you don't get to call it coincidence anymore. You especially don't get to call it coincidence when the patents were already filed. Moderna's mRNA patents, they were filed between 2010 and 2016. Ralph Barick's coronavirus research at UNC, decades of NIH-funded work with patents filed as early as 2002. And on December 12, 2019, where the WHO was notified, Moderna and NIAID transferred mRNA coronavirus vaccine candidates to Ralph Barick's lab for testing. So when COVID-19 hit, the platform was already built. The capital vehicles were already ready. The reinsurance triggers were set. The patents were filed. The personnel were placed. The only thing missing was the virus. And then it arrived right on cue. Now, you'd think this would be a story. You think maybe, just maybe, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, they would all want to dig into the fact that the pandemic preparedness was essentially a pre-built profit pipeline running through a convicted sex offender's Rolodex. But no, there's absolute silence. You know what they did cover? Which celebrity wore a mask wrong, how many feet apart you should stand at the grocery store, and all the other bullshit that they tried to inflict on people. It's infuriating that this was just all in the works, and not one person has talked about this. It's just, again, the whole pandemic, it was just a shit show from beginning to end, and the lives that were lost, that's a whole other conversation, which just, when you think about this planning in place and think about the lives that were lost after that, it's mind-boggling. So whether this was it's like I said, the things that were talked about, no one, out of all the pandemic, no one ever talked about this. This was a 20-year financial architecture linking Epstein, Gates, JPMorgan, Swiss Re, Merck, and the World Economic Forum to pandemic reinsurance products, offshore vaccine funds, and simulation exercises weeks before COVID-19. And so I have this video here in which we'll put this all into perspective. You wonder why Bill Gates was so on board, and the whole propaganda machine, and he was so on board for absolutely everybody having the vaccine. Have a listen here.
But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. People don't feel like going to the stadium when they might get infected. You know, it's not the government who's saying, okay, just ignore this disease. And, you know, people are deeply affected by seeing these deaths, by knowing they could be part of the transmission chain, and, you know, old people, their parents, their grandparents could be affected by this. And so you don't get to say, ignore what's going on here. there will be the ability, particularly in rich countries, to open up if things are done well over the next few months. But for the world at large, normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population. And so
when I see that, I just want to punch him in the face. So when you see someone begging everybody to get this vaccine, you wonder when you look at it from a different perspective that he's actually pocketing money from these vaccines. It just has a whole other taste to it. So apparently he's supposed to be going to testify, which it's just beyond me. It's just beyond me that the people it's like how much money do you need for the money to be enough? Which is just the whole mind-boggling thing about this. Every Epstein, all these people, they're so rich, and then they're figuring out and conspiring to figure out how can we make more money? How can we make more money? Let's keep people sick and then find the vaccine to cure everybody. It's just beyond me. Like I said, I feel like when I see his face now, I just want to punch him right in the face. But that's me. I don't condone violence, but it's just very infuriating when I think back to with the COVID vaccine and how much it affected everybody's lives between losing parents or siblings or like affecting children's lives. And oh my God, all for what? For money. And the funny thing is, the mainstream media doesn't want you asking any questions about who profited. They want you focused on compliance, obedience, trusting the experts. Well, here's an expert opinion. When the same people who designed the financial architecture also funded the simulations, held the patents, developed the reinsurance triggers, and placed the personnel, seriously, you don't get to lecture me about to trust. And that's why I don't trust the mainstream media at all anymore. I don't watch the mainstream media at all. I don't trust any of them because I think a lot. I did a video yesterday about doing the Gallup polls and who trusts the mainstream media, and I think it's down to 28%, and for conservatives, I think it's down to 8%. So I don't think I don't just don't trust the mainstream media at all anymore. It's just literally it's incinerated at this point. So just to be fair, this isn't there's no innocent explanation for all of this. The pandemic preparedness is real. Simulations literally happened. Donors advised funds are legal. Patents protect innovations. Reinsurance products manage risk. These are all normal things that responsible institutions do. And hundreds of organizations worldwide worked on the pandemic preparedness with no connection to Epstein whatsoever. Most of the people involved were acting in good faith, but where the innocent explanation falls apart, Gates had access to every law firm, every bank, every advisory structure on earth. JPMorgan had thousands of wealth advisors. Boris Nikolic could have retained any consultancy in the country, but they chose Jeffrey Epstein. Not once, not twice, repeatedly from 2011 through at least 2017, 5 years after his conviction. And that's not an oversight. That's a pattern, and patterns reveal priorities. So the question isn't whether pandemic preparedness is legitimate. It's why this specific architecture with its offshore arms, perpetual duration, arm's length profit separation, and parametric triggers was routed through a man whose job apparently was to ensure that no one could trace the money back to the people making it. That's not preparedness. That's pre-positioning with plausible deniability baked in. So, look, I'm not here to tell you COVID-19 was planned. I'm certainly not saying that. I have no idea. But when I did the research for this video, I really had to start to wonder. I got to tell you that. And like, you just don't know. And frankly, proving intent is almost impossible with the systems this complex. But here's what I know for sure. If you build a financial infrastructure designed to profit from crisis, and then a crisis happens and you profit exactly as that infrastructure predicted, at some point you lose the right to call it luck. And when the people building that infrastructure include a man who spent his life brokering access for powerful people who wanted to operate in the shadows, you lose the right to call it charity. The documents are public, the emails are real, the patents are filed, the simulation happened, the profits were made, and the mainstream media won't touch it because the same people funding their operations were funding the simulations. And I'm going to say this again. This isn't about conspiracy, it's about incentive. And when the incentive is to be ready for a pandemic, the question you should be asking isn't, are they prepared? It's prepared for what and for whom? Sunlight, they say, is the best disinfectant. Well, here's the sunlight. And we should all be shining the light down on this. And hopefully, the Epstein Files will start shining a light on a lot of things. So, guys, let me know your thoughts. It's very disturbing to me to see that, like I said, I'm not saying this is plan, but to have the plan for the maybe that this could be happen and then profit from all that. Like I said, what I don't understand, and I guess the question is, how much money is enough? Like all these people were already rich. Why what is the incentive? What can what can money possibly buy you that that makes you any happier than to put so many people through misery? To me, this isn't a coincidence, but I don't know. I saw someone on X today say, "Well, don't worry, nothing's gonna happen. No one's gonna go to jail. No one's." I hope to God something happens, and I hope to God Bill Gates gets his comeuppance because he certainly deserves it. So, guys, please like, subscribe, share, hype. Give me your comments. I'm very interested to know what you think about this. I did a deep dive into the. I could have kept going, but I'm already at almost half an hour. So I'm just shocked about all of this. So again, guys, please like, subscribe, share. I got more coming. I'm just diving in. I'm just at the surface of diving into these files. So it's been very interesting. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.